For decades, the evolution of the gray wolf was taught as a straightforward upward climb. The traditional timeline, known as the wolf event, laid out a neat progression: an early Pleistocene ancestor, Canis etruscus, evolving into the Middle Pleistocene Canis mospichensis, and finally the modern gray wolf. That model is completely false. Newly unearthed craniodental fossils and fully sequenced genomes extracted from Pleistocene permafrost prove this sequential timeline is structurally impossible. Instead of a clean, progressive ladder, the history of these canids is a volatile, nonlinear web. This complex evolutionary web is driven by rapid bursts of extreme anatomical adaptation, followed by sudden localized extinctions that leave no descendants behind. The late Pleistocene wolves were highly distinct megafaunal ecomorphs, creatures specifically engineered by their environment to hunt giants. They operated in ecological niches entirely separate from the wolves alive today. The history of the genus Canis is a sprawling tangle of deep evolutionary branches, abrupt dead ends, and isolated ghost lineages that vanish without a trace. This map displays critical excavation sites across Europe and Western Asia, housing the oldest remains of the genus. Two specific locations break the traditional timeline: Site 5, Italy's Upper Valdarno Basin, and Site 8, Dromanacy in Georgia, containing the earliest known Western Eurasian evidence. The specimens recovered from these early Pleistocene sites directly contradict the idea of chronological succession. Skulls found in the same geologic strata exhibit advanced anatomical features that belong in entirely different eras of the traditional model. To accurately reconstruct this evolutionary tree, paleontologists must rely strictly on modern geometric morphometrics and mitochondrial DNA. These metrics provide the only reliable data to trace exactly what survived the Pleistocene. The physical shape of the skulls found at Dromanacy triggered the initial disruption. When researchers examined their cranial geometry, they found structural anomalies that completely separated them from Canis etruscus, the species long assumed to be the basal ancestor. This chart plots the GNL/TL ratio, a metric measuring evolutionary divergence across Canis species. The Dromanacy specimens align closely with the derived Canis mospichensis, sitting entirely apart from the coeval Canis etruscus, which isolates as an extreme outlier. Beyond nasal length, paleontologists analyze the tympanic bullae, the bony structures enclosing the middle ear. The Dromanacy fossils exhibit a distinct outward-angled divergence in these walls. This specific geometry directly links these early fossils to the modern Canis lupus, completely bypassing Canis etruscus. No fossil taxa possess this specific trait, except for mospichensis and modern wolves.
This combination of GNL/TL ratios and tympanic geometry proves that Canis etruscus is an evolutionary dead end. Cranial morphometrics force researchers to abandon chronological assumptions. The phylogenetic tree was deeply and widely branched right from the beginning of the early Pleistocene. By the late Pleistocene, these evolutionary branches produced a highly specialized predator, a megafaunal ecomorph. These wolves were engineered to survive the severe climate oscillations of the vast mammoth steppe. Isotopic bone collagen analysis reveals the exact chemical signatures of their diet. They subsisted primarily on massive prey, regularly killing and dismembering mammoth, Pleistocene horse, and woodland muskox. Hunting animals of that scale requires severe biomechanical adaptations. These ecomorphs developed shortened rostrums and broad palates, maximizing the sheer crushing power of their bite. Their skulls feature pronounced temporalis muscle attachments, securing the cranium against extreme torsional stress when struggling with massive prey. The physical toll of this lifestyle is recorded directly in their dentition. Fossil samples from these populations exhibit severe tooth fracture frequencies, specifically concentrated in the incisors and carnassials. These fracture rates align precisely with the modern spotted hyena. These megafaunal wolves were habitual bone crackers, operating in a highly specialized hypercarnivorous niche. This craniodental plasticity allowed Canis lupus to alter its own skeletal development to dominate the Pleistocene landscape. Depending on local prey size and climate, this plasticity resulted in a vast array of specialized, highly distinct local populations across the hemisphere. We can trace the dominance of these distinct populations by extracting and sequencing mitochondrial DNA from permafrost remains, specifically looking at control regions ranging from 230 to 582 base pairs in length.
This genetic data groups the specialized megafaunal ecomorphs almost entirely into a single monophyletic clade, haplogroup 2. These robust wolves maintained massive, continuous gene flow across the entire mammoth steppe, stretching uninterrupted from Western Europe all the way through Beringia and into North America. This continent-spanning dominance contrasts sharply with haplogroup 1, a separate genetic lineage restricted to a much smaller, less specialized population, primarily isolated in Siberia. Right up until the peak of the Ice Age, the massive, bone-cracking haplogroup 2 wolves reigned as the absolute dominant canid predators on Earth. Then came the Last Glacial Maximum, 26,500 years ago. The close of this era brought severe, rapid climate oscillations, with regional temperatures fluctuating wildly and breaking the mammoth steppe ecosystem apart. As the steppe fractured, the Pleistocene megafauna collapsed. Mammoths and massive herbivores disappeared, completely eliminating the primary food source for haplogroup 2. This triggered a wave of co-extinctions. Because haplogroup 2 wolves were exclusively specialized for capturing and dismembering massive prey, they could not adapt to the absence of large herbivores. The result was massive, localized die-offs across the hemisphere. This catastrophic collapse created a severe genetic bottleneck. The apex ecomorphs were wiped out, and they took an immense wealth of deep genetic diversity with them into extinction. With the giants gone, a marginalized Siberian subset of haplogroup 1 seized the landscape. Because they were less specialized, they easily adapted to hunting smaller surviving prey. They expanded out of Siberia, rapidly repopulating the geographic niches left empty by haplogroup 2. The gray wolves alive today do not descend from the apex predators that dominated the Pleistocene. They are the opportunistic survivors of a generalized Siberian lineage that managed to outlast the Ice Age. The sequencing of ancient DNA also resolved the evolutionary origins of domestic dogs. In 2015, researchers mapped the draft genome of a specimen known as Timir 1, dated to 34,900 years ago. It belonged to an extinct ghost lineage entirely separate from modern wolves. By calculating genome-wide mutation rates, geneticists proved that domestic dogs diverged from a similar, now extinct common ancestor, well before the peak of the Last Glacial Maximum. The data reveals specific genetic introgression between the extinct Timir 1 lineage and early canine populations, showing an admixture ranging from 1.4 to over 27%. This ancient genetic legacy is preserved today in high-latitude breeds like the Greenland dog. That introgression provided early dogs with the specific phenotypic variations required to survive Arctic environments. Domestic dogs did not evolve from modern wolves. They carry the genomic ghosts of ancient, highly adapted Pleistocene lineages that the wild wolves themselves have lost. The fossil record of Canis lupus demonstrates the fatal trap of hyperspecialization. Extreme adaptation allows for absolute ecological dominance, but it ultimately guarantees catastrophic extinction the moment the environment shifts. The immense, robust ecomorphs that terrorized the mammoth steppe were erased, while the highly adaptable, generalized scavengers endured. Evolution is a ruthless pruning web, driven purely by survival. The modern gray wolf and the domestic dog are not the pinnacle of a steady evolutionary march. They are the lucky remnants of a brutal pruning that wiped out the true giants of the Pleistocene.